All right. Good morning, everyone. How we doing? Danielle, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good,
Long
good.
time
Good
no
to see
see.
smiling faces, some of your smiling faces and some of your names. But I'm excited for today's conversation. Many of you know me. If you don't, my name is Mark Sandvig. I'm the team leader of KW Legacy Group Realty, and I'm flanked by Danielle Sullivan, team leader of KW's Living and Elevate. We are excited for today's conversation. We know that the real estate market is ever evolving. The only constant is change, and our job as realtors is to be the real estate professionals, the economists of choice. And so you could choose to bury your head in the sand, or you could choose to pay attention to what's going on as you seek to serve your agents at the highest, or your clients, excuse me, at the highest level possible. Just a couple of like PSAs with regards to how we're going to run it, because we expect over 100, maybe 150 of you in today's conversation. So we're going to try to manage things well. Many of you have questions, many of you have thoughts, and we're going to do our best to batch that for the end of today's conversation, simply because it will become unwieldy if we don't. And so drop your questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat. We'll be responding as appropriate, but we'll bulk batch that as much as possible. That being said, I wouldn't mind hearing from one or two of you as we get kicked off, or even three. What's one thing, as you think about the market of the moment, what's one question that you bring into today's conversation that you would love some clarity on coming out of it? You could put it in the chat, or you can unmute if you feel so brave.
While they're thinking through that, Mark, I will also just add that after the session today, you guys are going to get all the slides so that you can take these and use them in your listing presentations and in conversations with buyers or potential clients. So if you're a screenshotter, go ahead and take them and make sure that Mark and I look our best when you do that, and Jose. And if you're not a screenshotter, just know that you're going to get these slides afterwards as well. So
Jose invariably has lazy eyes when screenshots happen. So, just
Always.
apologies in advance. Ashley Richard says interest rates. Yes, Ashley, I'm glad you said that. And we will be having conversations specific to what we anticipate coming as it relates to interest rates and what that should mean for you. Any others? Cool. Well, I'm sure they'll
To
come.
know what you think about like the Fed meeting, what you think is going to come out of that, and how that'll affect obviously the interest rates as well.
Sure. Cool. That's related for sure. We can definitely spend some time there. Awesome. Well, Jose, I'll yield the floor to you, and yeah, let's engage for an hour. Mute your stuff, and let's seek to focus as well as we can as we seek to serve our clients as well as we can. Go ahead, Jose.
Awesome. Cool. Good to see everyone. Appreciate everyone tuning in. I think I'm a nerd by heart, so some of these graphs, some of these numbers, some of this data kind of comes natural to me. So I'm going to try to make it a little bit more entertaining and a little bit more fun for you guys to follow along. And ultimately, the point of why we spend a lot of time putting these slides together and a lot of time preparing for this is to educate you guys and empower you guys to go be the local agent of choice. And when a client of yours thinks what's going on in the real estate market, we want them to feel confident reaching out to you because you have all of the information to help them succeed and navigate through this. So that's the point of these. Hopefully it's going to be of value to you guys. So let's get started. We all have seen these headlines. Is the housing market crash? What's going on with the economy? Are home prices going to hit a bubble? We've all seen it, and you can guarantee that your clients have seen it as well, right? And so this is kind of information for you to be armed as we go through and as we kind of navigate these conversations over the holidays and people are asking what's going on with the housing market. This is good talking tracks for you to be able to educate them properly on what's going on.
well, and if I can just add here, Jose, and we're not going to talk about everything coming out of NAR because we've got multiple brokerages here, right? And you can already probably see that a lot of your clients and consumers out there already know about all of those things that are happening as well. So it's not just this housing bubble and is everything going to explode, but it's also everything that's happening and changing, your clients and consumers are hearing those things, they're seeing those things, and they're reading those things. So those conversations will also come up over the next few months.
Yeah. So there's 4 areas that we're going to be covering today, just so you can kind of follow along. And so the first one is going to be, we're going to go over some economic and interest rate news. What's going on with the economy? How's that affecting interest rates? And what can we expect over the next few months as far as interest rates go? We're going to be going over some national news, which is important. And more importantly, we're going to be going over local housing stats, so you can go equipped into your listing appointments and into your buyer consults. We're also going to be talking about the presidential election, not who you're voting for, but how that does impact the real estate market in the fourth quarter, right? And then also, what are some of the people that are probably smarter than us talking about with what 2025 is going to look like for your real estate, for the real estate industry. And then the last thing is we're going to just kind of summarize it and then give some suggestions of what we, the 3 of us, think we should be doing as agents in the area to prepare to succeed over these next few months. Okay, awesome. And then we're going to leave some time for Q&A. You can throw stuff in the chat as it comes to your mind. Mike is going to be reviewing that and kind of giving us that information. And then we're also going to open it up for Q&A at the very end. Awesome. So when we think about interest rates and the economy, there's really 2 main drivers of what is happening with interest rates, okay? And where interest rates are going to be going. And so the first one, as we all know, and as we all have lived through for the last 2.5 years, is this inflation, right? And so the whole reason rates shot up is because inflation was going 5, 6, 7%, and the target rate that the Fed wants to see is about a 2% kind of inflation rate. And so that got out of control, which prompted them to take the rates up. And this is what we lived through for the last 24 months. And you can see as of the last report, it was reported at 2.6%. And we're getting closer to that Fed Reserve target rate. And so that is going to play into factor what the Fed's going to be doing with our interest rates. Cool. The other thing that kind of drives this is the unemployment rate, right? And so it's kind of a balancing act of unemployment and inflation as far as what they decide is going to happen with actual interest rates. And so you can see over the last couple months that they have started to see unemployment rate rising. It's still below the average. It's still below what they'd like to see, but it is actually on the rise. And I think probably the August report is going to even tick it up even a little bit more. And so those are the 2 main factors: unemployment and inflation. If you're not listening to much news, but you are listening to a little bit, those are the 2 that like your ears should perk up when it comes to that, because those are the things that are directly affecting what the Fed is actually going to do with rates. So this was the latest quote that I had saw. This is from Lawrence Young of the National Association of Realtors. It says, generally, when we get into rate cutting, it's not like the Fed meets once and then cuts it and then it's done. They said typically 6 to 8 rounds of rate cuts all through 2025 look likely. So I was at a listing appointment Tuesday night, and the seller was saying, hey, I hear the Fed's meeting and rates are coming down. That should be good for listing my house and like traffic on it. And I think there's often this conception of when the Fed meets, mortgage rates the next day are going to be cut by whatever they think. And so I asked Jessica Armbruster, if you wouldn't mind coming off of mute. If you don't know Jessica's with Cross Country Mortgage. She knows a lot about mortgages, and she's been around the business for a long time and does a great job. And so I asked Jessica to come on and explain, when they talk about Fed rates, how does that directly or indirectly impact mortgage rates, and what should we be talking about with our clients when we're hearing, oh, the Fed is meeting and they're going to cut the rates?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the call today. It's definitely a misconception that we hear when talking to borrowers. So I do think it's important to understand the difference. So when we hear about these meetings coming up and Feds are cutting the rates, I think most consumers think that they're talking about mortgage rates. But actually, the rates that the Fed is talking about during those meetings is the rate that banks lend money to each other. That directly correlates to credit cards, auto loans, checking accounts, saving accounts, money market accounts. But the traditional consumer thinks, oh, if the Fed is meeting and they're cutting rates by 0.25%, my mortgage rate is going to be cut by 0.25%. And that's actually not necessarily true. Just like you were saying in your slides earlier, mortgage rates are independently decisioned by lenders. And the biggest factors that contribute to that are inflation, job history, and then supply and demand, which creates competition. So if the interest rates are at 6.5% and the Fed cuts the rate by 0.25%, it does not mean mortgage rates are going down to a 6.25%. And I think that's the biggest thing in helping consumers understand that they are talking about the rates that the banks are lending money to each other. And so if you look at the last 20 rate cuts that we've had, there's only been 5 that were within 25 basis points of what the mortgage rates did and the Fed did. Typically, there's the commentary that the rates will adjust a little bit after that. And that's really what we're looking for in those meetings. Now, with that being said, the rates are as low as they've been since 2023. And the lenders have already started moving the rates down in anticipation for this meeting next week because we know there's going to be a cut. So I hope that helps.
No, that's exactly what I was hoping for. Is if you look at this graph, is they started talking about the Fed meeting in September and dropping the interest rate. Again, for your auto loan, for your home equity line, for your credit card, they started talking about that June, July-ish timeframe. And so what actually has happened over that time is rates have came down because it's been baked in. They understand that rates are coming down. They understand what's going on with the economy and so forth. And so they already have adjusted. The rates have came down to whatever it was at 6.4. So when you hear your clients talking about that, or you hear your buyer saying, oh, next week they're meeting to talk about the Feds, hopefully we can be an education source to them to say, yes, and here's how it really works. And here's how the rates have already came down based on what we know is going to happen. Awesome.
Jose, there was a great Inman article that came out today. I'm going to drop it in the chat. If you don't have access to Inman, I put it in Google Docs, so you can read it for free.
MVP.
If you don't know Jessica, she's a great lender. She's going to drop her information. If you have questions about this, feel free to reach out to her. She'd be happy to answer any questions. Thanks, Jessica. All right. So
Thank you.
Yeah. Mark, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, so this is a kind of a snapshot. We all know that interest rates dropping is typically good news for our buyers, but many of us are not maybe as sharp as we could be in helping our buyers to understand what that means. So at the end of the day, it all boils down to purchasing power. So just a quick walkthrough. April 2024, if someone was seeking a loan amount of $300,000 and their mortgage rate was 7.5% as of April 25th, their principal and interest payment, not including taxes and insurance, would have been just shy of $2,100. If that same client looking at that same price point was looking today or 2 days ago, again, subject to their credit, subject to all of that, but a broad number there, they would have saved roughly $226 per month, which for some people that's insignificant. For most of the clients that we're serving, it's highly significant. So that saves them 81 grand in interest over the life of the loan, and it increases their buying power. So if they're looking at a $400,000 house, in theory, they could look at a $435,000 house in order to do that. So that's really valuable for people that had pre-approvals from a little while ago, from people that have been thinking about the market in a certain way a little while ago, to say, hey, you might be able to afford more house now. Make sure that you're updated with your lender, or talk with Jessica, et cetera, to make sure that you're good there. The trick is they're not the only people with that idea. And so what we're likely to see is at least some short-term price climbing in list price to account, or sales price to account for that.
Yeah, if I'm an agent working with a buyer, this is probably part of my buyer counsel, right? This would be something that I would be going over with them to say, here's how rates affect you. Here's what we're doing with our lenders. Here's how you could be saving money. So just a thought, if you're out there working with a buyer, this is one way to differentiate yourself from the Pop-Tart realtor that just shows up to show a house. Like, bring some value like this to your presentations.
And the good news, just as a brief interjection there, is we have to have more conversation with our clients before we're getting started, thanks to the NAR stuff. So like, silver lining of that is we're able to slow down and have better conversations like this, which in previous markets, we may have felt we had to rush so much that we didn't have time to do that.
Yeah. So let's transition into both national and local markets, some stats. I'll try not to bore you with too many graphs. But it is important to see kind of what's nationally happening, and then on a local level, what is happening with our market. So if you've followed KW research, they do an excellent job with this, about putting out information. And so if you look at this, this is just how many houses sell on an annual basis in the United States. And you can see from 2021, which was a great year for a lot of people on this call, we were at 6.1 million houses sold in 2021, right? So 2023, we dropped to 4.1. If you're doing any math, that's a 30% drop from the top to the bottom in the amount of houses that are selling. So if you are feeling it, like production's down, it's a real number when you drop 35% in the amount of houses that are selling on a yearly basis, right? If you actually go back, you can see, like, you had to go back to 2008 to actually get that number. Put it in the chat if you were licensed in 2008. I was. It was not great, right? And we're living through that right now. And this is the most recent one. So again, this is part of KW research. They put this information out for us. If you don't understand graphs that much, I'll explain this very quickly. This is the amount of houses that are selling on a monthly basis annualized. So the purple is 2023. The teal color is 2024. Okay. So in June, we were on pace to hit 3.89 million in sales. July, I don't have an updated graph, I just put this in there myself, is at 3.95 pace. Now, let's go back here for a second. Who on this call thinks that we're going to hit 4.2 million in sales if in July, one of the busiest months, we're at 3.95? Does anybody think that the sales are going to go up in the fourth quarter and we're going to catch up to 4.2?
We have a couple yeses and absolutelys.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, what's that?
We have some yeses.
Okay. I'm going to be a little bit more pessimistic than that. I think that if we're at 3.95, it's going to be a hard road to get to 4.2. Like, I'm not sure if we're going to get there, given some of the stuff that we're going to talk about a little bit later. So you can see on an annual basis, if you look at last year, the numbers typically go down as the season progresses, right? As the year progresses. So maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully I'm wrong. But it'd be hard for me to believe that we're going to get to that 4.2 and we're going to have more sales than what we did last year. Maybe an unpopular opinion.
You're channeling the Gary Keller black hat thinking. What do you say? Gary has called 7 out of the last 2 recessions.
Yeah, I mean, a broken clock is right twice a day, right? I think that's so yeah, that's kind of the annual sales nationally. Anybody else want to grab this slide? Talk about this?
I think we can talk, I mean, this is sides per agent. And I think, again, for those of you who have been licensed for a while, you guys probably saw a lot of movement in the agents that were added to NAR, but then locally here. And with that obviously comes the sides per increase for them. The sides are dropping per the agents. And I think a lot of us are having the conversation or the thought that as we go into a shifting market, the amount of agents that have come in over the last few years, right? All the people that got their license and during COVID, they're going to start coming out of the market. And I think for the next slide here, Jose, what we're going to see is that they're actually making more money for doing a little bit less. And so, yes, I think agents will start to climb out of the business, but it will be for a different reason. And I think that reason is because we're moving into a skills market around the NAR stuff. So what this slide doesn't take into account is everything that's coming down there, right? There's like this law of equilibrium that Jose was sharing today, where we assume that agents are getting out of the market and they're still making more money because of the volume that we have in the market. So they're getting by more by doing a little bit less. And again, I don't think this slide takes into account moving into the skills market that we are all in and facing right now with the movement in NAR and tightening up our systems and our conversations with buyers and sellers. So
yeah, even though the amount of transactions dropped by 35%, the amount of agents has not, because the volume is still there, right? And so we're seeing, yes, you can see this little dotted line is coming down a little bit, and not nearly as fast as the amount of houses that are selling, right? And I think there's a catch-up phase of people getting out of the business. And the reason we haven't seen the major drop-off that I was predicting, that I was thinking, is because the volume is there to support the income for that many agents. That makes sense.
But I do think the agents that will get out of the business, none of them are on this call, right? Because none of them are bringing this amount of value into their clients, right? Again, what this doesn't take into account is the skills-based market and how important our value is right now. And so I know nobody on this call is going to fall victim to that, but they're not bringing these slides. They're not bringing those conversations. And so I do think we will see it. I think we will see a fall off in the next probably 6 months of people who just don't understand or aren't good at sharing their value with their clients, and they just sort of like fell into success. So nobody on this call, because you guys are all going to take these slides back to your consumers and clients.
All right, so let's transition into this balanced market. If you've been on these before, you're probably sick of hearing me talk about a balanced market, but it is very important. So depending on who you talk to, pretty much everyone agrees that a balanced market, which means prices aren't going up, prices aren't going down, it hits anywhere from 5 to 7 months is typically what we see, right? A balanced market where it's not going up, not going down. So what type of market are we in now? And so looking at this, there's different kind of seller's market and there's different kind of buyer's market. So when we think through this, think of 2021 as the far left side of the screen, right? 2020, where you put a house on the market, multiple offers, sells in 36 minutes. That's the far side of it. For those that have been in the business a longer time, 2008, 2010, we were setting people up for, we would be lucky if the house sold within 6 months, right? Like that would be really good because we were sitting on 7, 8, 9, 10 months of inventory in some sections of the market, right? So as we think through like a transitioning market, we're no longer over here where it's super red hot and buyers have FOMO and it sells in 36 minutes. We're moving over, and yet, as you're going to see, we're still in a seller's market. And I think there's a misconception, or maybe some of the media out there talking about, oh, we're in this buyer's market. And that's not necessarily the case, especially for Northeastern Ohio.
Well, and everything's relative, right? So even though we're still in a seller's market, so many people, particularly if you're a younger home purchaser, you still have 2021 and early 2022 in your mind. And so it's like, oh, the market's slowed down and there's sometimes price reductions. Agents that have been licensed for longer are like, yeah, that's what it is. But it's just begun to quietly correct rather than dramatically.
I think, again, sitting with the seller, some visualization of this needs to happen, right? Because they're hearing the markets change, or maybe they think it's still 2021 and it's over in the deep green area. And we need to educate them on where we're actually at. Or you're a buyer and you think I'm going to have to bid over list price, or you've heard that it's a buyer's market. You're just there to educate them on what the reality is. And so something like this in your buyer presentation, in your listing presentation, is probably important for you to educate them on. So this is, again, national numbers. What is inventory doing? So how much inventory is out there? You can see it's steadily climbed over the last couple of months. Topping out in last month is at 4.1 national number as far as inventory.
And that's months of inventory, right, Jose?
Yes, correct.
That number?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we've probably all seen that, right? We've all seen it happen on a local level. Put in the chat if you've done a price adjustment in the last 30 days on a property that you've listed, right? We're all out there doing it, right? Sellers are still of the mindset of pricing it at the very top of the market. And if we're not setting proper expectations, they're going to have to do a price adjustment, and we're going to have to work through that. And the number of price adjustments and the skill set to do a price adjustment needs to be refreshed, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. All right, so we're going to transition to some local information. I pulled 5 different counties: Stark, Summit, Cuyahoga, Medina, and Portage on this. And then I also did not do condos. All I did was single family houses. If this is not your area, it's probably relevant information for you for sure. And once we walk through all of these slides here, I'm going to show you how to pull it for your specific area. Make sense? Cool. So let's talk about local numbers. So these are the number of houses that sell in that 5-county radius every month, right? And so last month, you can see 2,402 houses have sold in the month of August. So if you look at that, if you added up all the numbers year to date, we're down about 3% from 2023. Year to date, we're down 21% from 2021. So if you rewind 5 minutes ago when we were talking about the national numbers are down 35%, right? We're only down 21%. So we're feeling it, and not nearly as much as some of the other areas that are feeling it. Going back to that slide that Danielle was talking about with volume and maybe what we're feeling is a lot of numbers on this screen. There's a lot of numbers. But in August, we closed 715 million in volume. If you actually look at that, it actually ends up being, in August, the 3rd best year for volume. Like, I don't think anybody on this call is saying like, oh, I'm having my 3rd best year, because it kind of feels different because we're coming off the 2020, 21. And if you look at volume, which is directly related to GCI, we're all having, in this area, the 3rd best year in volume.
So I think
Any
this will be interesting to see what happens in the next 90 days, because like the leading indicator came from the last two slides where we were all saying that we were making price adjustments, right? So it's interesting that we're having the third best year for volume. And when we do this again in another quarter, we will see if that leading indicator changed anything.
Yeah. Okay, so the number of, I can't see this, number of active listings. So if you hear the media saying the amount of houses for sale, it's up, it's a changing market. Yes, we have more houses for sale right now than what we did the last year. And we had nowhere to go but up, really. Like, let's think about this. Like, if we're at 3,600, it's really hard to go down from there. And look at this, just look across here. We're in August, 4,159, and we're saying, oh, inventory is increasing. We were at 8,000 houses for sale in 2019. Like almost twice as many. And 2019 was a seller's market.
Right.
It wasn't as extreme as 2020 or 2021, but it was still a seller's market. So for us to get back to a balanced market, you're going to have to increase that number quite a bit, quite substantially, to get back to even a balanced market.
Right. Everything's relative.
Right. So I need someone to do the math on this call. We have 4,159 homes for sale. I need to divide that by 2,400, which is the amount of houses that were sold in August. And that's going to give us our local months of inventory. Did anybody drop that in the chat, Mike?
Of course, Cassandra and
First
Tiffany.
person was the MCA. The numbers girl.
1.73.
1.73. Okay. So take that into consideration. We just said on a national level, we're at 4.1 months supply of inventory. And locally, Northeastern Ohio, those 5 areas, you're at 1.7. So when you think about that graph of the green to the red and how much months of inventory, we're still in a pretty hot seller's market. Now, are we doing price adjustments? Yes. Is it changing? Yes. Are we still selling stuff in under 30 days if it's priced right? Absolutely. I think when we look at a national level and we see it's climbed up to 4.1 months supply, it's all relative, because I have friends that live in Austin and they're on at 8 months supply of inventory right now across the board. Right. And so different sectors of the market, different areas of the market are going to be responding differently to what's going on right now. Anything to add?
Our job has always been and currently is generate listings. If you generate listings, everything else takes care of itself. And all the more so in Northeast Ohio, where we have half the available inventory that the nation does.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, because when we look at the national versus the local, one of the good things and maybe bad things of Northeastern Ohio is we are not hit first with any sudden housing changes, right? Usually we can tell what's going on because of what's happening on the coasts and what they're experiencing, and it may take 6 months to a year for it to actually hit in Northeastern Ohio. The second positive or negative, depending on how you want to look at it, is we don't hit the extremes, right? If they're going like this, we're like more steady. We go up and down, but it's not nearly to the extent of what Florida is experiencing right now, right? So pay attention to what's going on, because it's coming, and it's not nearly as extreme as what they're seeing in other places. Anybody want to take this slide?
Yeah, so we just showed Jose, go back a quick second. So the last slide was number of active listings. And then as we click forward, number of pending. So roughly half that number. And this is where when Jose has his cloudy gray perspective on the last bit of this year, I would say it's largely derived from this slide. We're seeing, homes are still coming on market, but as we see price reductions and as we see that number of pendings decline, not precipitously, but meaningfully. Like if you look at July to August, that's 400 fewer homes went pending in a still summer month, normally an active season. I think as we prepare for the next quarter, because we're always either 30 days away from the next paycheck or 90 days away from the outcome, whether it's lead gen or closing business, we should prepare for that on a personal level.
Yeah. My half glass empty doesn't come from this. It comes from like the last 6 years I've been predicting the market going down. One of these days I'm going to be right. One of these days. All right, so I'm going to transition and we're going to go into the MLS. I'm going to show you real quick if you would like to pull your own numbers. Can you guys all see my screen? Is it on the MLS right now?
Yeah, we can see it.
We can all see your password too.
Awesome. All right, so I don't read these. Okay, so here's how, if you're going to pull your own numbers, I know Mike Roberts is on the call. Mike, are you still on the call? Give me an area that you work, Mike, that I can pull these stats on.
Sure. Shaker Heights.
Okay. So I'm going to go just so you guys can all follow along and I don't go too quickly. You hit stats and then you go to customize. And then you just pull what you want to pull. So you said residential, right?
Yep.
I'm going to do single families.
Mm-hmm.
And then what school district is that, Mike?
Shaker Heights.
Okay, you're pulling that. And then I'm just going to tell the computer, I'm going to tell the MLS, what do I want to see? I want to see the past 5 years, and I want to see the number of active listings. I'm going to group it by month. Does that make sense? And I'm going to pull this up. So if I'm working Shaker Heights and I'm trying to compete against Mike, here's what I'm going to probably be sending out to the neighborhood is information that's going to look like this to say, here's the number of houses for sale. And so all of this information that I just pulled and that was on the screen, you guys can all pull yourself for your specific area, right? And so if I'm going into a listing appointment and I'm talking to them and they're in Shaker Heights, I could say, yes, inventory has risen. We're currently sitting at 64 houses for sale. And in 2019, we were at 169. So yes, while the market is not nearly as robust and we have more inventory, it's not substantially more. And then you can pull this for whatever you want. Maybe you want to see the number of closings, right? You just pull that information so you can give that to them as well, right? And so I just wanted to show that to you, just make sure you guys knew it was on the MLS. If you're going into a listing appointment, you might want to bring some of these stats, especially if you're in a competitive situation. You want to show them, hey, I know Shaker Heights better than anybody. This is the kind of information that they want to see to know that you're their local neighborhood expert.
Jose, is there a way to focus this in by like price range? Because obviously that can have like a big.
Yep. Yeah. So let's say, I don't know what the price range is. Let's say it's 300 to 500.
Perfect.
Right. And let's say I wanted to pull months of inventory is good, right? Because it automatically calculates what's the months of inventory. Oh my. And so hit data because who can tell what that says? Right now you're sitting at 1.7 months of inventory there. Right. So not nearly as intense.
So wild to me. It doesn't feel like that. It feels like it's so much more.
Yeah. Right. And so being able to bring the reality to them is really, really critical, right? Because they're either reading the headlines and seeing that the world is falling apart, or they're still living in 2021 and they think that they can get $70,000 more than what it actually is worth. So being able to bring that, like, I just want to give you tools so you can see how you can help educate, and you can pull it for whatever area, whatever criteria that you want. Cool. Awesome. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about presidential election. We're not going to talk about the debate, and we're definitely not going to talk about who you're voting for. But we are going to talk about the impact of the presidential election and what it's going to happen, what's going to happen over the next couple months potentially, and then also transition that into the 2025 real estate market and what people smarter than me, smarter than Mark, smarter than Danielle are saying about what the 2025 real estate market is going to look like. And I think that's important when you talk about business planning and what you're going to be doing for next year. It's probably good to know some of these kind of predictions of where we think we're going to be at for next year. So, Mark, would you mind talking about this slide?
Yeah. So basically, this shows, you could all drop an emoji or a thumbs up. How many of you have spoken with someone in the public that says, I'm going to wait until the election to do X, whether buy or sell? Answer is all of us. And so this is the data. And again, these are national numbers that basically say what happens during election season as it relates to number of homes that are sold. So in non-presidential election years from 1963 onward, so if you're interested in the 50s, we don't have that data, roughly 10% drop in the number of homes that are sold during that period in a year-over-year sort of way. And then in presidential election years, in the orange on the right, it's a 15% drop. So really, we're talking about from a big picture standpoint, it's a 5% difference or 5.2% difference on election years versus non-election years. And so as you have clients that say things like, well, I'm going to wait and see what happens, I think a good question, without making it too political, is what are you waiting to see? What do you think will happen? Because what happens in election years typically does not dramatically impact the market over your typical October, November, which is, when the market is often slowing down from a seasonal standpoint anyway. So I would encourage your consumers to think a little bit more about, like, what do you, no one's going to save you. What do you think is going to happen as it relates to the sale or purchase of your home?
Well, Mark,
Yeah,
I think you could also take that with the buying power slide that you talked about earlier, right? And that conversation going into this is for home buyers, there's already a 5% decrease of competition going into this, and your buying power might look a little bit different because of rates right now. So you take both of those things into that conversation.
Yes. Yeah. Especially if you're a buyer, waiting until the election is likely to be less productive than productive.
Yeah. And so this is, again, from Keeping Current Matters. And again, we'll see a little bit of a slowdown October to November, not substantial at all. And then most importantly is whatever happens, whatever candidate gets in, it really doesn't affect whatever's going on with pricing. Meaning wherever pricing is going, whoever gets in, it doesn't matter if it's going to go up or down from there. Whatever is happening is going to continue to happen regardless of red or blue getting into the White House, right? And then we also know that typically rates will be coming down somewhere between July and November, right? And so again, home seller that wants to wait until January, I can't tell you what is going to happen in January. I can tell you that history says between now and November, we see rates starting to come down. After that, I can't tell you what's going to happen. So does now make the most sense for you to sell?
And as Jessica shared earlier, we're already seeing rates come down. Not, and that should continue, but we're not waiting for a one big moment. It's no, it's already begun from a predictive standpoint, and come next week, we'll see more of that. But what are you waiting for?
Yeah. So when we look at 2025 and transitioning into 2025, these are the reason I like this graph is it tells us what Fannie Mae thinks, what MBA says, what NAR says, etc. What I like is it's the average of all four. Let's just see what everyone is saying and then just average it together. So if people think, hey, I'm going to wait to 2025 because rates are going to come down dramatically, I don't see that happening. Just because everyone that's way smarter than me is predicting that maybe 6.3, and then it's going to come down, and maybe we get under 6, maybe in 2025. So if you have that buyer that's saying, I'm just going to wait till it gets back down to 4, I'm not sure that's going to work. I'm not sure that's going to be the case. And this may be another piece that you might want to educate them on is, hey, I'm not trying to sell you. I'm just telling you what the economists are saying. And then this I thought was pretty reassuring. This is an average of a bunch of people out there that make predictions on what home values are going to do. The least, I guess the least best forecast is 0.3. So this would be the far end would be Jose's prediction. And so you're looking at anywhere from 4.4 to 0.3. If you average it all together, maybe we see 2.6 appreciation, which is a normal year, right? Like 3 to 4% appreciation is a pretty normal year. So it's kind of interesting. No one is saying that prices are coming down.
Which is not true.
What's that?
Sorry, just to jump in, a year or two ago, this same graph, 3 or 4 of these same entities had negative price growth projected. And so the fact that, 100% of them are saying like, hey, we'll be somewhere on the positive side doesn't guarantee it, but I think there's a pretty good likelihood that they're right.
Yeah. That's good news, people.
It is good news.
This one is more homes are expected to sell. I think, again, my prediction is we're probably under 4 million houses sold in 2024 in the US. So bring that into this equation. They're averaging 5.4. That could be a pretty substantial year of increase if we're at, let's say, 4 and we go into 5.4. I think the nice thing to hear about is that like better times are coming and 2024 is almost over, basically. So yeah, I think NAR is always super optimistic about this. And to see all 3 of these entities saying, yeah, it's definitely going to be a better year with home sales than what it is in 2024.
More good news.
Yeah. All right. So everything from this point on was KW research. It was Keeping Current Matters. It was local MLS data. This is mine and Danielle's and Mark's commentary and suggestions on, if I'm in your shoes, which I am, what I would be doing and how I'm preparing for the next 4 to 6 months. Do you want to talk about this, Mark?
Yeah. So, is the worst over? That's a good question. I think 18 months ago, a lot of people were, oh, the market's about to fall off a cliff. Is the recession coming? I'll join with Jose. I don't think the fourth quarter is going to be an easy one for agents. I think prices will buoy us. But what we're experiencing, if anyone's ever run a marathon, I ran one last year, miles 20 through 23 are the worst, not because it's the hardest there, but because you've been doing this for a long time. And so as we see what's likely to be a challenging fourth quarter, it's more about the endurance than it is about the difficulty on its own. And so I think our encouragement is, we'll take us to the next slide of bolstering as you think about your financials, as you think about expenses in your business, as you think about business building activities. Many of us spend highly when we're high and we try to tighten the belt when it's low. And our encouragement would be tighten the belt now, even if you've had a good month or you expect next month to be a good month, because the worst thing that happens on the other side of it is that you've got some extra money to work with in your business flowing out of that. Anything to add, Jose or Danielle?
I would just say, I think it's interesting that before seeing these slides, like you called it, winter is coming, because we've got some things happening at our market center level around this, because I do think it's not a time to get creative. It's a time to get back to the basics. It's a time to do the things that we all know that we should be doing every single day as we go into the fourth quarter and kind of set ourselves up for quarter 1 of 2025. Like, it's not getting easier right now. It feels like, from some of the agents that we've had conversations with, some of the price reductions have come very quickly over the last 3 weeks, which tells us what's going to happen over the next few months. So it's not really a time to get creative as you're thinking about business planning for 2025, some of those things that you were getting excited about and maybe even putting into place, that might change based on what happens in the next 30 or 60 days. And that's not scary. I think that is business, and we're here to help sort of prepare you for that. But I do think, like, again, winter is coming. It's time to sort of batten down the hatches, build the moat, and get back to the basics that we should be doing.
Yeah, and one thing I would add to that is, well, I care about how many houses you're selling and what the market's doing and all of that stuff. What I really care about is that we're making good financial decisions for us and our family, right? That we're financially putting in ourselves and our family in a place to win. And that's hard to do when you're in the middle of it, and it's too late to really make substantial changes. So my encouragement is, it's September 12th. What decisions should we be making now that if the fourth quarter is really hard, we wish we would have made now, right? Do we need to upgrade that car? Do we need to spend that much on that lead gen source that doesn't have a good return on investment? Now is the time to be making those decisions versus December or January or February, where it's not as robust, right? So that's my encouragement. Yes, I want you all to sell a lot of houses and be successful. And I would, if I had to choose, make better financial decisions to help set yourself up for success moving forward, right? So that's my encouragement there.
And I would just add, if you guys were licensed in 2020, if you can remember that March or April mindset, like, that's the mindset that we're sort of getting back to. It's where can we stop? Where can we cut? Where can we pause a little bit? Because we were so unsure at that point. Like, that's the mindset that a lot of our agents should get back to, is that, like, weird March and April of 2020 where we weren't sure what was going to happen. And we did have to get back to the basics.
So, depending on how long you've been licensed, you've seen ups and you've seen downs, and you've also seen different talking tracks, I'll call them, of what we should be saying to our clients. And I think as we transition into a different market, not just with the NAR stuff, but like the market in general, the things that we're saying to our clients should be different than what it was 2 years ago. Like, we need to set different expectations. We need to talk to them differently. We need to be well-versed in how to talk to them. A listing appointment today looks a lot different than a listing appointment 18 months ago. And have we developed new talking tracks to set proper expectations with that seller, right? And so this is a script or talking track that we have been working on my team, and Aaron Roby is going to unmute. He is so bravely offered to be to walk through this script with me, as if I'm sitting down with a seller and talking to them about what are we looking at for the market and what should we be looking at with pricing. So Aaron, are you there?
Yes.
Okay. So Aaron, I'm the seller. You are the agent. You're going to talk me through this talking track to just set a proper expectation around it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, this is something that I actually have already done a couple times. I would say, getting the proper expectations set for the seller now is more important. As we've been mentioning, hey, we're making gradual changes in the market, and the sellers are starting to notice it too. So I think this is something that's good to bring forward, even upfront, just in the listing appointment, instead of waiting, hey, 2 weeks down the road. It's hey, Jose, whenever we're pricing these homes, we're looking for, 4 different things to see over the next two weeks for what we know to be true if we're priced correctly. Okay. These 4 different things that we're looking for, it's 3 to 5 private showings per week, not just from our showing or our open houses. Okay. Buyers coming back for a second look. So we're going to be on the lookout to see if the buyer's agents are scheduling a second showing. Our feedback should be positive from both agents and the buyers, right? So we want to see good feedback from both those. And then we're looking for offers or talks of offers. Now, if we hit these 4 criteria, these are the 4 metrics that are telling us, hey, we've got the property properly placed and priced. Okay. So if we're seeing only some of these items, but maybe not all of them, for example, I would say maybe if we're getting some showings, but no second looks, the feedback is mixed, then the market is telling us, hey, we're probably off about 5% here. And if we're getting none of those metrics, we put the property onto the market, it's complete crickets, maybe only a few showings over 2 weeks, and the market is simply telling us, hey, we're off about by 10%. Now, does this make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And, the good news here is we know that our marketing works. What we're doing is a proven model, and we know that works. So the only thing that we're going to be testing here when we put your home onto the market is the actual price here. Does that sound good?
Sounds great. Awesome. Can we give some love to Aaron?
Yay.
Thank you, Aaron, for coming and doing that.
Awesome.
And I didn't tell him to do this, but he took a talking track and made it his own, right? He put in his own words. The meat was there, and he kind of seasoned it and cooked it the way that he wanted it to, but the meat was there, right? The information was there. So I think Mike has already dropped that into the chat box. If you want to use that, make it your own. I think the one thing I would encourage you not to do is to not think of what you are saying as you're saying it, right? But that's the worst time to do it. We should be coming in with our talking tracks of how we want to set expectations with the seller and walk them through pricing and the expectation of getting their house sold. So that's there. That's for you guys to use it as you wish. The last thing is we're going to hit on, we can open it up for Q&A if you guys have some questions. It's so critical is we're seeing and hearing a lot of stuff out there with the media, and my encouragement to you during this time is to protect your mindset and do it how you want. I think some of us probably need to come off of social media and not pay attention to what other agents are saying or what the news is saying, but setting up a daily routine to make sure that your mind is in the right place so you can come from contribution with your clients and actually help them navigate this. That's what they're paying us for, is our expertise and our navigation through whatever they're going through. And we can't do that if our mindset is not healthy. So however that looks, I know how it looks for me, but however it looks for you, just take that, hopefully, words of wisdom to make sure that as we're kind of going down this path, making sure that we're putting up some barriers around our mindset to make sure it's in the right place to help people. Mark, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, briefly, and then we will do questions. Failing to plan is planning to fail. And so this is kind of, we're entering the time of year where we should begin thinking about what needs to happen in our businesses going into 2025. And so on Wednesday, November 13th at St. George Greek Orthodox Church in Fairlawn, open to agents of all brokerages and particularly agents of K1 brokerages, Jose will be hosting, and a number of us will be helping to facilitate a business planning clinic on that day. So you can scan that QR code to register. You will be getting, that link was also dropped in the chat just now. You'll be getting emails about it if you're part of the K1 network, but plan on joining us that day.
And I'll just add here, if you've never been to a business planning clinic or you're not with Keller Williams right now, it gets very specific down to the number of appointments and conversations you have to have with buyers and sellers to meet your financial goals. There's worksheets, there's some pre-work that goes out. So it is not fluff. It is a impactful session where you truly walk away with, if you've got a goal in mind for 2025 and how much money you want to make, it breaks it down to the amount of activities that you have to do to get there. So I would say it's probably the most impactful class of the year that you can attend. If you've been to one before, if you haven't been to one before, and there might be some CE with it. So we're working on some things there.
Yeah, I'd almost call it a workshop versus a clinic. Like you're going to be doing work there. You're going to walk out of there with maybe not fully formed, but a pretty good structure to like what your business plan is going to look like for next year.
We've allowed
so
all of like 10 seconds of for questions.
We are open to questions if you have any. If there's been any in the chat, I have not checked the chat the whole time, so I don't know what's going on there. Anything?
One in the chat earlier. Michael Jones asked, is there a way to show sellers the number of price reductions actually taking place in the school district, zip code, to assist in asking for price reductions?
If there is a way, I'm not sure of it. I would love to have that information, but I do not know of a way to do that accurately, especially when, because you can do a price adjustment or you can do a withdraw and relist with a new price on it, and it kind of messes up where you would pull that information from. So I don't know how to do that.
You may actually be able to do it on your KW agent command site, on the public facing site.
Okay. There you go, Mike.
Other questions? Hot takes.
Any like, yeah, questions, but any ahas from this? Did anybody walk away and they're like, I'm gonna go do this, or I feel better about this, maybe I feel worse about this? Any ahas that anybody's willing to share?
I just want to say just that thank you, Jose, for just stating basically mindset is everything. And I know we've said this time and time again for years and years, but it just constantly needs to be reminded because it's easy to fall into the negative funk. So I know we have all the tools and the statistics and all the things that we have from this call, and thank you so much for that. But mindset is everything. So I just wanted to add to that. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Such a good point. It feels so like basic. It's like, oh, you know, touchy feely, but like at the end of the day, how I show up each day is how I, you know, impacts everything, all the actions that I take that day. And if I'm not taking my mindset captive, then I'm going to be blown about by the news or the weather.
Yeah.
I think it's important, and I'm glad you brought it up, is the difference between the national and the local numbers. That's a huge, I mean, it's double. So what is generally spoken of in the media or in print or anywhere is national numbers. So that's what all of the people generally out there are thinking. And it's not, it's accurate. You know, we're sitting here going, wait a second, that's way off. Well, it is local. So we need to get out there and share that. So I think that's the aha, that we don't go into a buyer or seller consultation without those local numbers and say, this is what's happening here. And yes, this is happening nationally, but that doesn't matter to us.
We are not in Austin, Texas, and they may be reading a clickbait article based upon some story in Austin, Texas.
100%.
Well, and if they're reading those articles, I think, Tim, to your point, is making sure that you show up with the numbers, because saying it is different than handing them something that you just printed out or took a screenshot of from the MLS. So I know there were a few people in the chat that were asking how to run those things. I think for the biggest aha for probably a lot of people in the room is how to run those things. And so making sure that you guys have the slides and watching that, maybe the recording of this to dig back into that is going to be huge for going into some of those appointments and some of those hard conversations.
Awesome.
Cool.
Very cool. All right. Mark, Danielle, thank you guys for your expertise. I appreciate it. And it's good to see everyone.
Yeah, we appreciate you guys being here. Thanks, guys. See you later.
Thank you.